to identify everybody that's on here so we all don't jump up to introduce ourselves at the same time. And we'll try to manage virtual meeting. And just so everybody knows, we are recording this. That's why Paige is here. She remembers to push the record button. I don't. All right, Eldon James, Rappahannock River Basin Commission. We have with us John Bateman with Northern Neck PDC. We have Kevin Burns with a regional decision. Say it again, Kevin.
Regional decision system.
Thank you. We have Joseph Quisenberry, Town Manager, Town of Warsaw. We've got Adam Lynch. Come off of mute and introduce yourself.
I'm River Steward with Friends of the Rappahannock for Fredericksburg and Stafford.
Great. Adam, welcome. I think this is the first time we've had you with us.
Thanks.
Welcome. We have John McCarthy from his basement in the mountains.
I prefer Evil Lair, but okay.
Okay, that works. With Piedmont Environmental Council. Denise Nelson with the Berkeley Group and George Washington Regional Commission and Middle Peninsula too, right?
Yes, and okay. Crater.
Well, they're not in the Rappahannock.
Well, just so you know.
Okay, all right, but Crater, okay. So recognized. We have Brian Hoffman with the Friends of the Rappahannock. Brent Hunsinger, Friends of the Rappahannock. Corey, Simone Petrie, ACF Environmental, and if let's see, I'm gonna do a quiz here. Who can tell me what town in Western Virginia Corey has a strong family connection to? Also nicknamed Helltown. Front Royal. His family had this big, what would you call that? General store, little bit of everything place?
We called it a gift shop. Right
yeah, every kind of gift you could imagine. Quite the place. All right, enough of that. Brian Bays is with us with Department of Forestry. Dave Edmonds from DEQ. And I have a mystery phone caller that I'm gonna have to let come off mute and identify themselves.
Marta Perry, hello.
Hi, Marta. Okay, good. I had you on the list as you would be coming in. Oh, and wait a minute. We're going to admit one more person, Jason Bellows. And the chairman of the Rappahannock River Basin Commission, Jason Bellows, has just joined us. So perfect timing, Jason. We just run through everybody who was here. If you click on the participant list, you can see it, and I won't run back through it for everybody. Jason, welcome. We're glad to have you with us. Okay, with that, let's jump right to our first item of business on the agenda, and I'm going to turn it over to John Bateman to do a little introduction.
Hi, how are you all doing? Can you hear me okay? Good. My name is John Bateman with the Northern Neck Planning District Commission. The Northern Neck Planning District Commission has helped several of the towns in the Northern Neck administer community development block grants for business district revitalizations. We started off with Montrose and then moved on to Colonial Beach. The next stop was the town of Warsaw, and currently we have efforts underway in Callio, and the town of Whitestone just received funding. Back in 2015, the town of Warsaw put together a group and started organizing to revitalize their business district area at the intersection of Highway 360 and Main Street. In 2016, 2017 timeframe, the town received a planning grant from the Department of Housing and Community Development to develop a PER to address stormwater issues and to hire a team of consultants to develop a Warsaw Business District revitalization plan. In 2017, the town applied for and received community development block grant funding to do a business district revitalization. Those activities primarily revolved around facade improvements, design and installation of signage, so on and so forth. But it also involved a revolving loan fund component that businesses could use to implement those facade changes. And the third and essential component was the stormwater management and drainage component that was developed with that previous BER. And with that, I'll introduce Joseph Quisenberry. He's the town manager of Warsaw, and he can describe a little bit about the business district revitalization and how they incorporated their stormwater needs with their revitalization needs. Joseph.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Thank you, John. So many valuable team players here represented, so I'm glad to see that. Am I able to do a screen share?
Yes, you are. I've enabled that, so if you hit the screen share button down at the bottom, you should be able to take control.
Wonderful. Everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Okay. All right, well, let's get started here. So, so this is our downtown. Actually, our improvements are so recent that I just went on Google Maps and you can see the main street written on the road there. And this is what our downtown looked like in August of 2016 was when this was captured. So as you can see, looking around, no stormwater network, no businesses, and really no activity. So we came together and knew that, you know, something had to be done, and, you know, that this just wasn't a town that anyone, I wouldn't want to live there. And I don't think, you know, it doesn't look like a place that many people would want to live at the time. So we knew something had to be done. And we came together, as John alluded to, and went through the processes of, you know, getting the teams together, identifying grant funds, and then putting in the application. And we were fortunate for DHCD and some others that we received that funding. So just a few blocks down the road, we had this abandoned shopping center that several bondholders held bonds on the property, and it was just a mess. They wanted over $2 million initially for this, and bondholders were located all over the country. Some have passed away, so their children had them. So the town went through the legal process of eminent domain, and a property that was for sale for around $2 million, we acquired it for $400,000, and we were able to get this property for, you know, it's 11.5 acres. And we worked with the Plain District Commission, Friends of Rappahannock, and some other groups, and knew that this is the low point, you know, for a potential stormwater project. So we, like I said, we knew perception is reality. When you drive through a town that looks like this in this photo, you know, it just wasn't good for business or for our residents or just for the general morale. The morale for the town was really low, and we knew that we had to address so many issues, so we sort of got to work. So again, step one, we identified what needed to be done, and our key elements were revitalize our downtown, alleviate our stormwater flooding, which on Main Street actually gets pretty bad, and provide green space for residents, and just improve our overall socioeconomic, you know, structures, you know, that can help those lower income or provide employment or just have a good quality of life. And so we got the planning grant, got that together, sort of highlighted what we needed, and then we moved forward. So here's some of the grants. I didn't list all of them. We have some smaller ones, but the bulk that we received, we did get the state's largest allocation that year for $1 million from DHCD. We have received $618,550 from DQ's Stormwater Local Assistance Fund. We received $200,000 from National Fish and Wildlife, $1.4 million from VDOT to redo our sidewalks around town, and then a $50,000 Agriculture and Forestry's Industries Development Fund grant, and that helped us to land a new brewery downtown that we're still working on. So without these, you know, we're 1,500 people, residents, our budget, if you take out grants just for our admin, excluding wastewater and water, our budget's roughly 1.3 million for the year. We didn't have the money, to do all these projects, and so we knew we had to get grant funding. And fortunately, each grant can be leveraged with other grants, and so we, I think that we've expanded on that as much as we possibly could. And so some of these photos are from what you have today. So that first building complex you saw, Main Street on the left, you have that up there now, just a beautiful complex of buildings. You have new curb and gutter. We have our new stormwater drop inlets being installed right now on our stormwater line. Our downtown is 90% occupied. And I've listed just some of the businesses that we have currently. And by combining our stormwater revitalization, providing green space, we were able to maximize, I think, the potential that we had. And so far, the results have been pretty astonishing. So that old shopping center, you now have this beautiful green space and stormwater facility. So again, it's 11.5 acres. And the 2-acre facility, the pond itself has the capacity to handle our downtown stormwater runoff. And another thing that we didn't even think about, Ace Hardware is wanting to come here, and they purchased a parcel that was really too small for a stormwater facility. And so it's also, economic development. We were able to offer them to link into our stormwater facility at no charge, and we saved them quite a bit of money. And so it's crazy how even unforeseen benefits are still popping up, well after this idea. So for this facility, we plan to have walking trails that connect to the community college, and something the town has, the Enchanted Forest walking trails, where a guy has carved like 40 faces into the trees. And so we've connected, we will connect those two systems with our system. So we'll have miles of trails in downtown. We're putting in a disc golf course, mixed use like amphitheater, farmers market. And then you just have this beautiful green space with the pond. So it's really for $400,000, and with the grant funding. So the total project for the stormwater came out to be $800,000. And so the bid, and so when you add in our grant funding, that came out to be $816,000. So there aren't many projects where you actually cover everything that you need with grant funding. That's really rare, and we realized that. So to end, key takeaways: partnerships are key. Get your planning district commission involved, your nonprofits, Friends of the Rappahannock, get your chamber, get these groups involved and work together. Small towns can accomplish big things. I think there's this misconception that if you are small, you have to think small, and we didn't want to do that here. And so, think big, incorporate green infrastructure with your projects. You don't have to just revitalize downtown and let that be that. Put in green space, put in that key infrastructure, and try to create a very eco-friendly project at the same time. And then lastly, grant funding is available. It's out there and it can be leveraged. And I think that that's probably what's key to doing these types of projects in small towns. The grant funding is there. Don't think that you can't get it. If you get that team together and work, it can happen. So that's my small little presentation, and I can answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, well,
I'll ask the first question of you, Joseph.
Yeah.
How were the businesses, the new businesses that came into town? How were they? How did they help the process along? What part did they play in the overall revitalization of the town?
Yeah, that's a good question. We appreciate them so much because we understand that the town itself can't form businesses to start the process. And so without the first one and the second one and that multiplier effect, we would have never gotten where we are. So just the reconstruction efforts, and letting us acquire easements to put in infrastructure and being such willing partners. Without that, we wouldn't have our stormwater network, our sidewalks, or any of that. So they've been great to allow us to have easements all along Main Street. B, without their efforts of, seeing the bigger vision of the town, because really, as you could see from just a few years ago, it looked pretty rough, for them to buy into that vision and want to be a part of it. We could have never done that without them. So I think that, there are a myriad of different ways that they've helped us, so much. And then lastly, the tax revenue to help pay for some of these things has been nice as well. So, I'd say it's, again, unrealized things that we didn't even think about are, being visible due to their participation in all of these things.
Joseph, this is Eldon. Before we open it up for other questions, I just want to identify, we've had some people join us while you were presenting. James Martin with DEQ, Pat Cody with Northern Virginia Conservation Trust, and I think David Nunley, Caroline County. All right, well.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, Jason, please go ahead.
I see you have incorporate green infrastructure in here. Was there any effort to incorporate electrical charging stations for electric vehicles to try to capture some of that clientele in the community?
That's a really good question. And yes, actually. So we are partnering with the new Ace Hardware. The owner owns a Tesla. And so we're partnering to put charging stations downtown.
Hey, Joe, this is Adam from Friends of the Rappahannock. Love the presentation. I drive through Warsaw a lot. Every time I go through there, it seems like there's a new business opening up or some other really cool thing that's happening. So great job being a local champion. One thing that intrigued me that you said was that when Ace moved onto that lot that was too small for stormwater, you guys were able to create that infrastructure to capture the stormwater. Could you explain a little bit more about how that process worked? Were there any especially burdensome kind of bureaucratic headaches that you had to go through there, or was that sort of a voluntary arrangement that you guys worked out?
That's a really good question, and it's one of those I always say I have to be really careful because DEQ has been such a wonderful partner and provided us with grant funding, and so as we all know, being with the Chesapeake Bay Act and I think some of the necessary requirements that we have, we had a parcel in town that's literally right on the corner of Main Street and Route 360, which for a town our size, that's a traffic count of 20,000 vehicles a day. So that's a big deal in terms of economic development and getting businesses here. So this parcel was so small that to put the 12,500 square foot Ace Hardware with parking, he was not left with enough permeable surface area to put in a stormwater facility. So long story short, we were felt like we were back in this corner where we just can't redevelop this parcel. And that was, really, we felt, that's a shame, like there has to be a solution. And so, we thought about it and we worked with the PDC and with our engineers, and we had enough capacity at the facility to actually let him, build into that network and have his runoff go into our new stormwater system. So we probably saved him. Of course, he had enough land to do a practice, but it was about $100,000. So with us doing this network, we saved this and offered as an incentive to this business about $100,000 to come to Warsaw and redevelop and show this, main piece of property in town. So it was an economic incentive that the town offered him. It saved him, $100,000, and it allowed for him, to come to town and redevelop this parcel. So it was just a win-win-win all the way across the board from every angle.
Great, thank you. Like I said earlier, Fredericksburg is my beat. Lots of small lots in Fredericksburg, so I may be picking your brain in the future about that same concept.
Yeah, please do.
Joseph, this is Brian with Friends of the Rappahannock. Do you have any additional capacity that could be leveraged for similar type arrangements or anything like that in that stormwater pond?
Hey, Brian. Yeah, the long story short, yes, we do. So I guess I should, one other element that I don't really talk about too often, at the Gannon redevelopment, the contractor is, unfortunately, but sort of fortunately in a way, behind. And so now we're in the liquidated damages portion of things. And so we were able to run I need to throw this in there. We were able to run the stormwater line to him and put the drop inlet in for the amount of liquidated damages that was owed to the town. So we actually didn't even pay, or we're not going to pay for the line that runs to this facility. So in the future, if anyone wanted to hook into it that's nearby, they certainly can. We have the capacity. They would just have to pay or work out an arrangement where the stormwater line is run to them if it's not already existing. If it's existing, then we'll provide that as an incentive, and that really helps with our growth and development.
Yeah, that's great. I was curious about how the town was able to facilitate that connection with no cost to the business. That's great. And I know that there's some models. The city of Fredericksburg, for instance, has an option for a developer to pay into an in lieu fee pot that the city is then able to use to develop the requisite amount of stormwater reductions, using that money on land that the city has access to if a developer doesn't have room on site or adjacent off site. So that's really great that y'all have that capacity.
Other questions for
Joseph, this is Kevin Burns. With the photo that you have up, the earlier question about electrical vehicles and charging stations kind of prompted me. Any thought about future retrofits of some of these buildings to put in solar panels on the roofs? And another resiliency question, was any use of pervious pavers or pavement done in any of the building?
Yeah, those are really good questions. So one thing that I'm not going to say I've learned, but that is what we deal with in our town. It's we're surrounded by beautiful little towns, which we're very fortunate, but that makes competition pretty fierce. And so what we've learned is if the town doesn't, or the county doesn't have the facility or the capacity or whatnot, it becomes really difficult for economic development and to bring these businesses here by saying you have to do X, Y, Z, because you already have to do all your site plans, your site work, et cetera, et cetera. I'm definitely open to providing more of like an incentive to assist with that, with maybe the solar panels, because I'm all for those types of things, and but what I've learned is those sort of mandated costs, you can do those in like Fredericksburg, Roanoke, Richmond, but when you come to small towns, they'll say, yeah, well, we'll just go next door where they really don't require anything, and so I guess trying to strike that balance, maybe like an incentive type program in lieu of a mandate, is something that we could look into, and I'm totally open to that, and I'll take your question and think about that, and maybe that's something that we can come up with in the future.
Well, I guess as a follow-up, I was thinking that, well, let me ask it this way. Was the county, particularly their economic development function, any kind of partner in this, or is it totally a town lift?
For our projects, we of course got blessings from the county and well wishes in terms of where boots meet the road. It was all town. We provided all the capital. The county, our economic development team here at the town actually did everything that you've seen in the town limits. The county, as they grow their, contingency fund, they're able to do a few more things. They're talking about maybe getting a new economic development director and opening up that program, but things that you've seen in all of these, the town, we did that mainly ourselves when it comes down to the dollars and cents portion of it.
Thank you.
Joseph, this is Michelle Edwards. Even though this is a stormwater discussion, I've got to ask, how did you manage to get the first couple businesses in the door? Was it the grant funding? Was it other incentives? How did you convince them to go from that first picture to this, to take the risk?
Oh, that's a good question. It was really tough, actually. So what we did, we knew that we knew breweries are still currently, the rage. People are, want those. And we thought, what the heck, there's not one in really the closest town nearby. We don't have one. So let's try to go after that. So we have a beer distributor here in town, and they said, hey, there's a really neat brewery in Newport News. We want you to go down there and talk with them. So we rented a bus, took half our town council and some staff. We went down there, had negotiations back and forth. We applied for that $50,000 through the state Department of Ag and or Secretary of Agriculture. I'm sorry. And so we did receive $50,000 to help. The town did pony up an incentive, and the way that we form our incentives, we did it just as the state does. We do it in a forgivable loan. So if they operate for 5 years, hire X amount of employees at a certain wage, and put X amount of dollars in for capital improvements, then the town will give you X amount of money. And so that's a program that we've really been pushing lately. I'll toot our horn one time and then one more time, and then I'll be quiet. We did win last year the VML Economic Development Award across the state for a program that we have. So what we do is, it's called the Rent Assistance Program. If you come to Warsaw, we'll pay $600 a month on your rent for 1 year if you sign on to a 2-year agreement. So that got all these little small businesses to come to town. For the larger ones, we do forgivable loans. So if you come to town, say we'll give you a $50,000 forgivable loan, but you have to employ, 10 people at, $17 an hour and put in $400,000 into the building. And so what we've learned from that is our tax revenue, especially on restaurants, that'll pay for itself within, a year and a half. So we're almost just forwarding some of their revenue to them, and then we're recouping it. And so that was a way to pump capital into our downtown and then recoup it pretty quickly. And so we learned that it's actually worked out really, really well.
Okay, other questions?
I have one brief question for you, Joseph. One thing the folks here didn't get to see was how bad the stormwater flooding was on Main Street. And, that was really one of the catalysts for incorporating the stormwater management piece into the business district revitalization. You can't have crosswalks and people traversing town if they're stepping in giant puddles of water. Joseph, I know your head is swimming. You're still involved in this process. It's not over yet. But forward thinking, does the town have a future phased approach to additional stormwater? And have you guys considered additional BMPs to treat that stormwater, such as tree plantings, so forth?
That's a good question. I did want to go back to this original slide. If you see the sidewalk, so these businesses here actually have water routinely go up into their businesses. So, I mean, it was pretty bad. There's just, you see no stormwater network literally anywhere. And the cool thing is VDOT told us it's not our problem, even though I thought it was. So anyways, we put together the team and got the stormwater network in. In terms of future development, it's something that, like you said, I want to just hammer this phase out and then maybe think about what we can do, but we are working on a 60 home townhome subdivision that will be decently close to this. And so I'm not sure where our gears are turning for maybe a potential phase 2, if everything works out to be the right way, because, you know, a subdivision that large in a small town is going to require stormwater, stormwater structure. So we're looking into a potential phase 2.
Okay, any other questions for town manager? Okay, I've got one for you. Do you have an estimate of what the positive tax impact has been from the project, and a kind of a secondary question to that, and number of jobs?
I haven't been able to quantify the jobs yet. I mean, we did to a certain degree, you know, because we have to meet certain obligations by DHCD. But honestly, our tax revenues, so even with COVID, you know, and most budgets are seeing a hit of, you know, 15 to 20%. Every tax revenue except one in the town actually was up from what was budgeted. So I think that that's a testament right there. You know, we actually have seen no financial impact so far from COVID. You know, our mills tax is skyrocketing. So yeah, we definitely see it. We're probably talking, when everything, just say we don't get anything else from this point forward, I would say we'll probably get around 100 to 150,000 more dollars just from this part of Main Street right here. So it's been pretty huge in relation to our 1.2, 1.3 million operating budget. So I think we're pretty excited about that. And well, we need to pay for some of this stuff too. So it works out. In terms of employment, I know, gosh, part-time employment has skyrocketed. We'll be adding, oh gosh, I would say 150 part-time jobs across town, not just downtown. It's about 150 part-time jobs, and you're probably looking at 25 to 30 full-time, and they have to be above that wage threshold. So they're all pretty good paying jobs. And then we just, you know, received word we're working with the factory to hire 100 to 300 more full-time. So knock on wood, we've realized some huge employment gains and tax revenue.
All right, I'm going to ask you another, that, you know, it leads me to another two-part question. And this kind of goes a little afield, but you mentioned the townhomes that are potential. Mm-hmm. With the pandemic situation, have you noticed interest in folks moving to the area from more urban settings? And that means you got to have broadband because they're working from home. And a project like this kind of sets all that up.
Yes. So fortunately for all the town, we have really great internet access, very fast. You know, I lived in Richmond when I went to school and everything, and internet here, honestly, I think is faster than what you get almost in Richmond. So we're really fortunate for that. It's hard for us, I think, because we hope that the majority of our residential growth, which it is happening, you know, came from our revitalization. But I would say recently, probably the uptick, you know, that we've seen is probably revitalization / urban folks maybe trying to come out to small towns that offer great, you know, quality of life. And the way I look at it, you know, we are only an hour from Fredericksburg, Northern Virginia, Richmond, or Hampton Roads. So we're in the middle of the urban crescent. And I don't think you could find a better quality of life than being an hour or less in a beautiful small town on the river, you know, and still have access to the nation's capital, you know, and all these things within a relatively short drive. So I hope that that will help lead our residential growth. The reason we reached out to this developer is, you know, we have homes on the market that go in 5 or 6 hours, like they're not even on there a day. We have a 48 unit apartment complex going up right now. We just finished a 16 home, a smaller subdivision. They sold out within like a year. That was built out, everything. So we know there's a demand. And so we reached out to them, and fingers crossed, you know, we hope that they come to town, because we would love to see a quality, you know, builder in town.
Thank you, Joseph. Quite a dynamic situation. It's exciting, and quite a project. Other questions from anybody else on the technical committee? Okay, with that, we're going to move on to the second part of our agenda. And I'm going to turn it over to Denise Nelson, and I'll let her tell us a little bit about the draft environmental strategic plan that is circulating for comment in the George Washington Regional Commission area. Denise.
Hi, good morning, everybody.
Do you need to share your screen?
Yes, I would like to. Is that okay?
You should be able to, yes.
Let me find the right button. I have more. No. Make this bigger and see if I have more functions. There we go, share screen. I want to just show you a couple of PowerPoint slides to kind of keep the conversation flowing. And I would really love to take advantage of your expertise on today's call. So before I get started, Eldon, how much time do I have?
30 minutes or so.
Okay, good. Good, because there's an assignment for you all day.
An assignment? Well, you just reduced it. You now have 15.
Well,
go ahead.
So Eldon,
and if you need a little more than 30, it's okay.
Okay, thank you. The George Washington Regional Commission is working on an environmental services strategic plan. It was a special project this year that we're wrapping up. The contract ends September 30th, and the final reports are all due in November. You can see my PowerPoint, yes? Okay. Nothing too glamorous here, just wanted to keep us organized. So GWRC for years has had the Coastal Zone Management Technical Assistant Grant, which all of the 8 coastal PDCs get to facilitate activities to work towards the state's coastal zone management goals within the localities. So we're there to convene the localities, to educate them, to get them to share stories, lessons learned, questions, and to support them in special projects every year. And then in 2018, we started getting funding for the Chesapeake Bay Watershed Implementation Program. In GWRC, there's 4 counties in one city, and Stafford County and Fredericksburg, the city of Fredericksburg, have MS4 permits, but the other 3 don't. And then all of them have their own VSMP program except for Caroline. So we've got quite a wide variety of program sizes and abilities. And so GWRC is trying to facilitate activities that support water quality goals. And then recently, the 8 coastal PDCs applied for and are being awarded a resilience grant for the next 3 years. So in addition to the wide variety of things covered under coastal zone management, the water quality under the WIP, now we're specifically going to look at resilience, and we're going to do that in line with the state's coastal resilience master plan, which is really focusing on flooding, sea level rise, storm surge, things like that. But of course, we're allowed to incorporate other resilience climate change type hazards. So there's the 3 programs, and we are hoping for additional programs. I should tell you here, I didn't want to type it because it was too sad, but I talked on the last meeting about the NIFWIF grant proposal for pollution prevention, essentially transferring knowledge and activities from successful MS4 programs and conveying that to non-MS4 localities and trying to find ways to implement those activities. That grant was not accepted. I have a debrief coming up soon, so I'll find out why, but we have that ready to go when we find another funding source, or we're going to roll it into this strategic planning effort. In the meantime, though, we have submitted another grant for a forestry grant program to look at a regional greenways feasibility study. We are looking at the BRIC and flood mitigation assistance program grant call for proposals that's out right now. And with coastal zone management program, we're looking at the enforceable policies and what can be done there in the 5 years and how it might impact GWRC. So the environmental program is really taking these funds that are offered annually from the different state departments and figuring out scopes of work and the required match. And if we can come up with a good scope in the match and get it approved, then we can bring this funding in. A lot of it's non-competitive, some of it's competitive, and we can really serve our localities. So that brings us, I wanted to show some examples of what we've done in the past. We've helped create data sets, whether it's GIS data or otherwise. We've helped localities update their comprehensive plans, their ordinances. We've actually helped with some physical projects where we installed signage identifying stormwater best management practices so that people will see that and get a little educated when they're out and about. We've evaluated the option for localities to join the community rating system under FEMA's flood insurance program. We support and continue to support the Plant Central Rappahannock Natives campaign, and in the background is the Siddell Brooks demonstration garden in King George that we supported the construction of and keep promoting. And then over years, we've had lots of involvement supporting green infrastructure planning efforts. So the question before us and before Kate and Linda at GWRC is, all right, what are we gonna do next? So every year we have to come up with these scopes now for coastal zone management, and now the WIP program is going to let us start proposing our activities for annual scopes. And sometimes GWRC didn't know what to write. So the idea was this year is a special project where we would work with our stakeholders to develop a strategic plan, and the goal there really was to have a list, 5 years, 10 years, of projects that we can just copy and paste and put into our scopes of work for these contracts. And you know, we're optimistic. We got excited and we said, well, we've got too many, so maybe we'll also start looking for additional grant funding to get things done faster. And so our main goal here was to come up with the scopes for these future activities and to coordinate the programs, leverage the programs, and figure out the best way to, you know, get the most results for our money. And the process for developing the strategic plan was stakeholder engagement. We had 3 specific meetings with our stakeholders, which is the localities, but it's also all the partner organizations, Friends of Rappahannock. Eldon's always invited. I think he's come a couple of times. And engineering and other experts in the area, whoever wants to join us, Mary Washington University, others. Collectively, we put together a survey of questions based around the priorities in coastal zone management and WIP water quality. And we sent out this survey to as many people as we could reach. And we wanted people from the localities, all different departments at all different levels, even elected officials, and then everybody else as well. So we looked at those results, we discussed them, and we came up with this draft strategic plan, which includes an implementation schedule. So we know what our goals, objectives, and strategies are, and then we prioritized them and we lined them up with the available funding to create a 10-year plan. And that is what is out for review right now. The plan, we focused on the coastal zone management program. The state identified 10 goals, and one of them is water quality, so we figured the WIP program was covered. they have them in the order. I don't even know if it's prioritized or if it's just random, but we went and prioritized that list. So we, starting the next year, fiscal year, we'll focus on resilience, water quality, physical features, which are the habitats and the species. That's the best term I could come up with. Sustainable development, which is in coastal zone management, focuses a lot around the waterfront development that, you know, like bridges you have to have. How can you do it in a sustainable manner? And then technical tools, which is the data, the tools, and making sure, you know, you're sharing the expertise. And the rest of them, we had so many wonderful ideas that we really just focused on the first 5. And then we came up with objectives under those goals. They vary based on each goal, but in general, we kind of went with this theme as long as we didn't feel like we were forcing it. So first, the WIP and the coastal zone management programs always require engaging the local governments. That's the main point, is to facilitate at least 4 meetings a year where we bring people together. So we create that network regionally, and we discuss, we educate, we share our lessons learned. You know, we have that forum, we have that space. And then beyond that, we said, okay, well, within this topic, within this goal, can we do training? And then based on the topics that we trained on, does that lead to some sort of policy that we can support adoption? We can write the policy and help them adopt it. And then does that lead to actual physical projects that we can support the local governments with? And then beyond the local governments, how can we reach out to the greater public and then the development community? So this is just a small snippet of this big table that we have. I know you can't really read it, but I just wanted to show a glance, and I'm happy I have the table open in Excel also. But so we have in the table the 5 goals, all of the objectives under each goal, and then the strategies are the white lines. And we spread it out over 10 years, and then we went through, and the little green squares are, all right, now in coastal zone management, we're going to do this strategy in this year. And we kind of mapped it out like that. So the goals, the strategies themselves are already somewhat prioritized in the list. But then we, you know, mapped out over the years based on the money we have or the money that we feel compelled to go hunt for, what we can get done. And so you're welcome. I'm sorry that I never shared the link with you before, but you're welcome to go take a look. There's Dropbox. I shared this with the localities and the stakeholders at the beginning of the month, and I asked them to get their comments back to me this Friday. So I know that's a little short turnaround for you all. So if you want to skim through it and send comments, please next Friday before you take a holiday weekend, that'd be great. You know, I have been receiving comments in a rolling fashion and addressing them, and that's been very helpful because, you know, some comments are typos and some of them are really big, deep things that we have to consider and work into the plan. I will tell you that if you go to the link, there's the Word version of the plan, the written plan, that's about 50 pages, which I wrote it to be a comprehensive reference on the data we have on GWRC, the partners that we have and the capabilities of those partners, the needs of those partners, and then the plan itself. So it's got a lot of background. You don't have to read all 50 pages. If you want to, you can, and you can let me know what I left out or if I didn't make a point clearly, because I don't know that anybody else, like the localities, especially the higher department heads, they might never read this, but this is what I'm going to use to guide my work going forward. But then beyond that, there's a bunch of appendices, which are the meeting minutes from the stakeholder meetings and things you don't need to read. But the keys are Appendix K is an Excel file that is that table. It is the whole table. So that's the most important table. And then Appendix J, we were working on a table of physical projects that the localities would want to implement. And so that's a big ask for them to share their list. You know, the MS4 communities had a long list of feasible projects that they may install if they get SLAF funding. But the non-MS4 localities they were like, well, I guess if you want me to put something on the list, I wish we could have educational rain gardens at every school. So there's this list is people voluntarily contributed to it. And my goal of having that list is to say, all right, so if you are thinking about rain gardens at schools, that means GWRC should do a feasibility study. Or if you have a design that's shovel ready, well, maybe GWRC can help you find the funds to do construction. So that was the goal of that list. It's the first time a region-wide list has been compiled, but it certainly does not circumvent or take priority above the local programs.
Hey, Denise, before you continue on, we've been asked if you can put that link in the chat.
Yes. Oh, you want to look at it right this second? I'm impressed. So it's Dropbox. If you have any trouble, I'd be happy to. I'm trying to find the chat. I have you guys kind of minimized so I don't see everything. I'll figure that out in a second while you guys are doing your homework.
Bottom of the screen in the middle.
Yeah, I don't have my screen maximized. I have you guys like as a little window thingy. Uh-oh, now you're gone. Okay. Now you're a super tiny box and you're a big box, and I'll figure that out in a minute.
Didn't mean to disrupt your presentation flow. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm frustrated. That's how I did the share screen. So I'm frustrated I can't get back to it. Okay, well, I will share that. And I presented a much shorter version of this to GWRC's board on Monday just to let them know it was coming. And I put together a one-pager. It's basically the executive summary from the report. And so I can give you these slides, Alden, I can give you that one-pager, but please, everybody, you're welcome to go to the link. It is the version from August 1st. I do have working versions that I've been editing. So if you see any minor typos, don't worry, somebody's already identified that. But I really wish, so we had a really great discussion. And so this is where it gets to your homework or your right now work, classwork. Yesterday, we had a 2-hour call with the GWRC stakeholders. A lot of them have joined on the line today. So I'm gonna be really diplomatic about how I report on how that conversation went. It was a really good discussion. It's a lot more people were on the line, so it was hard to have a real discussion. And we were more so focused on the upcoming WIP scope of work because it's due to DEQ in September for January. We had a good discussion, high level. People had been sending me comments and they didn't regurgitate them on the call, but it was a forum to bring up new ideas. And so I wanted to, oh, there you are. Somebody posted something, and so now I think I can get to chat. All right, I'm posting. Okay, it was hiding. I have 2 screens and sometimes things get hidden. Sorry. So I'm after yesterday's conversation where I'm processing these new ideas. I'm very happy to meet with you all and get your opinions and your expert advice, especially, you know, from RRBC and from, I see James Davis Martin's on the line, you know, some people in programs that weren't on the line yesterday. So just to remind you, when we started this scope of work, we said, you know, honestly, Kate and Linda ran out of ideas to put in their CZM proposal every year. And the idea is that they're supporting the localities. So you have to keep asking the localities, what can we help you with? What can we help you with? And so the idea was to kind of figure it out and be strategic by coordinating the 2 programs and likely other programs that are out there. But the main goal was to have a list of things to put in the scope for next year and next year and next year and next year. So that's what we were thinking when we put this together. And so as such, unlike other strategic and implementation plans, you won't see an assignment for responsible party. Because in Appendix J, which is the crazy table I showed you with all the strategies, the responsible party is GWRC. You know, it's GWRC doing that under CZM and under WIP funding or additional funding. And our thoughts about getting the plan adopted were, we get our stakeholders, which are our staff level environmental managers, mostly the stormwater ESC people. We get them to approve it in our working meetings. And then we take it back to the board because we don't really think the board's going to read it. And if they did, they wouldn't really, you know, it's not their area of expertise. They would say, well, what did my staff person say? Did they like it? And we'd say, yes. And then the board would say, okay, it's adopted. And that's as much as we were hoping for. And then of course, we're hoping to integrate this plan so it's more effective with the hazard mitigation plan and still kind of keep tabs on, at the GWRC level, hazard mitigation plan, transportation bike ped plan. But, you know, maybe people at the local level will look at this and use it to shape updates to their local plans. That'd be great. But the question before you today is, while we set this up to meet our original goals, should we try to dream bigger? Is it the appropriate time and the appropriate place to take a little bit bigger step and expect more from this plan? Should we assign other people as responsible parties? I don't know, think that we have the authority or the enforcement ability to assign the localities to certain tasks. I can't imagine Friends of the Rappahannock want us to give them assignments. But what we've done is we've partnered an awful lot with Friends of Rappahannock, and you won't see that written out too much in the report because I'm waiting for their feedback, poke. But what we've done, and I didn't show you in the table, with each strategy, there is a column for potential partner. And in some cases, partner means, you know, we'll just let 4 do the tree planting because they do it so well and we don't want to get in the way. You know, so when I say partner, I mean that across the scale. So that was one idea that came up. We're just as of yesterday starting to tackle. I know Kevin and Pat are on the line there. They'll can back me up. And then another idea was, well, is this a plan that comes from the locality staff level that gets adopted by the GWRC board, or do we need to take this to the locality department heads or the locality boards, the county administrators? Do we need to get it adopted at a higher level so then they can facilitate integrating it in all the local plans? And then my question there is, or are there already mechanisms for that to happen? You know, is there a Chesapeake Bay program outreach and group for the Chesapeake Bay program? And then another comment was, all right, well, beyond the governing board, should we be looking at the higher level elected officials? And that's, you know, Rappahannock River Basin Commission. You know, we don't want to try to copy or replace anything that's already being done, but we want to align and be as effective as we can. And so with respect to the last couple of comments, I'll tell you that it's not very pretty, but in the Excel file where we say, there is a hidden column description that's not the most well-written part. It's more like stream of consciousness of what this task means, what the strategy means. And under the annual one for facilitate meetings with the local governments, it's not just 4 quarterly meetings with the stormwater managers. There's a couple extra bullets that said, you know, at least 2 outreach efforts to the local governing boards and at least 2 outreach efforts to legislators in conjunction with RRBC, you know, in case there's an opportunity for us to influence or back up some proposed legislation. So I would like to open it for discussion. And we are happy with the plan as far as our original goals. And you know, that some of the stuff that we're struggling with as far as our original goals are the difference of a highly sophisticated environmental program that's an MS4 and a VSMP, and then not. Caroline County's neither. How do we make sure we're meeting all of their needs? You know, Caroline County specifically asks us to audit their program and recommend procedural and structural changes, whereas, you know, Stafford County said, we get audited by everybody and their mother. We don't want another audit. So figuring that out. And then another major thing that people were asking for is, well, can you help us, again, maybe the more rural, understaffed areas, King George, Caroline are saying, you know, we're starting to grow more and we need more staff to process everything. How can you help us get funding for more staff? Which I don't even know how to start with that. So I want to open it up now. I will stop talking. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions for the things that we're tackling that were specific to our original objectives, please share. Or we want to go into those should we dream bigger questions, let me know.
Elvin, this is Kevin. I guess I'd like to start the comment because, you know, Denise is trying to carry on, you know, so my legacy and involve it with Linda's leadership to serve the needs of the region currently, not what it was 5 years ago or whatever. But she's facing the challenge that I faced in that there wasn't any cash to match a lot of these new grant initiatives that materialized. And so she's trying to cobble together, to support Linda, cobble together a regional program that is meaningful to the local governments. Particularly challenging in terms of stretching that program out over a multi-year horizon and gain political commitment that isn't always necessarily long-term in its approach, and do it with a commitment of local staff time to participate in projects and, you know, try and cobble together local resources. And I had an offline interaction with Denise to kind of paint what I saw as some of the challenges that she's facing. And so I guess I'd like to kind of pose her question to the group in a different way, particularly to some of the PDC representatives here, in that, one, it's oftentimes difficult in these regional sessions to have all of the right people in the room at the same time to get any meaningful commitment or conversation going about the viability or the practicality or the political feasibility of ideas that are being kicked around. And secondly, regardless of how many local staff people you get around the table to brainstorm, they don't know what tomorrow's priorities might be as it comes down, you know, from the board, city council, or through the manager or administrator. So in a nutshell, that's the challenge. And I'm supposing, because this has been true in every region I've ever worked in, I'm supposing that same environment exists in the Northern Neck, Middle Peninsula, Rappahannock, Rapidan regions as well. But I'm wondering what those participants here this morning have to say about Denise's challenge.
I want to jump in real quick and say thank you, Kevin, because I was talking off the top of my head as far as our current challenges. And yeah, that was the third major one, which I'm trying to figure out how to address is, especially with the new resilience grant, you know, we grew this group from stormwater managers. And I've been growing it recently to incorporate more planners and more Parks and Rec. the other, more specific, are we doing plan reviews? Are we doing permitting? Are we doing site inspections? The more specific activities. And now with the resilience grant, we're going to be reaching out to, like the fire chief and other emergency services. And, a locality can't send 10 people to one meeting, 5 localities, they're not all going to be interested in that meeting. So, but we need to have them engaged in some way at some time. And I'm trying to sort that out. For the stormwater managers, we talk about, okay, well, how do you adopt the healthy watersheds recommendation into your comprehensive plan? And they're like, that sounds cool, but I'm not a planner. I'm not a zoning administrator. But we couldn't get the planners and the zoning administrators to come. One example.
All right, I guess that was teed up to throw it to Michelle and John first. So any reactions from our Northern Neck and Rappahannock Rapidan PDCs?
I mean, we have our land use and environment committee meetings, and people come and go depending on what the topics are. So sometimes we have a room full of planners and zoning administrators. Sometimes we have a lot of Parks and Rec people with some planners. Sometimes it's all stormwater managers and Friends of the Rappahannock. It depends on what's on the agenda, and people pick and choose what meetings to come to. So, I mean, I haven't been afraid to have discussions that are specifically geared towards planning staff and reaching out individually to say, hey, this is important, this is why it's important, and please come to it. And I mean, our localities, some of them, there's no planning staff, so you're getting the county administrator, so it's a really hard sell to get them to come. So I try to be selective in when I reach out to them and say, this is really important, you need to be engaged in this. So I mean, that's the way I tackle it. I'm acknowledging that we're not going to get everybody in a room together except on a very rare occasion.
I guess I'd add that one of the challenges of making this subject relevant to other agencies who are pretty much within a narrow track of focus of their interest is in trying to find the relevance to them. I mean,
yes.
A brief digression I would make is to say that one of PEC's projects is this fish passage improvement where we're trying to take out culverts that block brook trout from going upstream into habitat they've been sort of denied access to. And even by the standards of fish, I don't find the brook trout to be a particularly sexy fish. It is to those who recognize it as the Virginia state fish and so on and so forth, but that audience is not enormous. But if we can convince VDOT, as we're in the midst of doing on 2 projects, to replace their culverts with fish passage compliant structures because it improves resiliency, suddenly they're interested. So, the story we tell one constituent group about why we're doing this is because the brook trout is a charismatic fish, the state fish. It's gorgeous. I struggle with that. But anyway, there are people who care about that. But to VDOT, it's all about, you put in a fish passage compliant structure and we come up with 25% of the cash match from National Fish and Wildlife Service and NIFWIF and some of our private donors. That's going to result in your structure surviving 10-year storms 25% better, and we'll prove that over time, and let's partner on this. They're in. And that's a small case, but it applies to some of these challenges too. How do you find their level of engagement, their interest there? Are they going to do it? Are they going to sign on because they think it's morally the right thing to do? Maybe, but I've generally found if I can find someone, has a dog in the fight, they're more likely to be supportive than if it's simply the morally right thing to do. I'm not sure that's helpful, but that's just an observation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we've had discussions at the Bay program level with the local government work group just yesterday about the co-benefits and how going forward, that's the only way you're going to get local governments to the table with all the competing interests and with the pandemic. And I completely agree with John, finding those co-benefits that are most important to that individual organization is the way to go. Just acknowledging that you're not going to get, like you said, you can't get all the government staff in a room together all the time because they have other things that pull them in various directions. So you need to be somewhat selective in how often you're pulling everybody together.
Are there other meetings that we could try to show up at and get 5 minutes?
Oh, obviously PDC meetings help because people are already in the room together to some degree, or we've done like what am I trying to say? Emergency managers, when we've dealt with things that were relevant to them, we would go to the emergency managers meeting, for example, things of that nature. But that's going to be dependent upon your region that you're working in, what kind of meetings and what your topic is. So there's likely other things besides emergency managers or like the regional transportation meetings or things like that that would apply just to that group of people.
And the outside of the PDC, I don't know what other meetings. I suppose the Chesapeake Bay program has tons of meetings everywhere all the time with different people. Is that if they're already reaching out to county administrators or elected officials, then no. Okay, I'm seeing a no.
Well, I mean,
That's the problem. That's the problem, is they don't engage with the right people. We have on the local government advisory committee, we have one, and it was a last minute addition. The land use administrator for Westmoreland County was added, and I have to get secondhand information from her about what the activities are. It's really with the local governments and everyone, it's herding cats. You got to find out what everybody's interests are and find out where their interests overlap. And frankly, right now, for the Northern Neck, at least with the local governments, communication's at an all-time low. And it's a combination of factors. I mean, part of it's the pandemic, but they've become more self-sufficient. They're not as reliant on the PDC for, those little, oh, here, dump this in your lap, fix this problem for us. And also the polarization politically is really debilitating. The local staff are just afraid to act on anything, even the smallest thing. And participation in a workshop, it's hard to bring them together, So I think what I've shifted gears to is to work individually with each one of them, find out what their what their challenges are, what are their goals, and as I find overlapping areas of concern or goals, then I loop in the other localities, I loop in state agencies. I mean, from the state government level, the interest is at all-time high. And I feel like our localities are missing an opportunity here to really get somebody's ear. And with other engagement with our legislators, that's at an all-time high. We have no problem getting our legislators on board with efforts. It's really getting the local government, and especially the elected government, on board.
Sometimes I feel like if I could just real quick. Sometimes I feel like if I could just say to the local stormwater manager, be like, hey, did you know that this person in the county is on the, what did you call it? Local government advisory committee for Ches Bay? Like, I think they don't even know that. We could help connect those dots internally for them.
Yeah, the only way you're really going to get true participation is if they're involved in the process from the get-go. And I'm going to give you an example. DEQ right now is trying to come up with new regulations based on legislation that was passed in the 2020 General Assembly session. And they approached our PDC to get some input on how the local governments administer their programs. And we really just aren't involved in that. I understand. I know how each one of them kind of approaches it and what their overall approach is. But as far as the technical details, what they need to be doing is soliciting input from the localities. But I think there's this fear that that they don't want to make it seem like the regulated is helping set the rules. And that's unfortunate. They need to be involved at the very beginning of the process and at the upper echelons so you understand what the challenges are in implementation. But that just doesn't really happen.
It's a good point. And sorry, Marta, was that you?
I guess I was asking a question towards Michelle and John, with both of which have soil and water conservation districts with much larger staff than tiny little tri-county city here, which is still, well, that's another story. But I'm curious how you guys interface with them, because soil and water districts have a very long history of, I mean, we used to be the erosion sediment control and or stormwater management staff for a lot of our localities, and things have shifted over the years. And I'm curious what kind of relationships you have with them on those issues. Essential
and ongoing. I mean, we don't,
right.
Soil and water districts involved in everything we do. I mean, there's really no light between, I mean, Michelle, by all means, add your flavor, but we talk to them all the time.
Yeah, talking, but like, how does the interface look? Like, what does it look like? Do you go to each other's meetings? Do you have liaisons? And like, how does it function?
Well, I mean, from the
elected directors from Soil and Water come to, your PDC meetings, or?
Yeah, so I mean, we're a little bit different because Culpeper Soil and Water Conservation District does still do erosion and sediment control plan review for the majority of our localities. And they're very active with the VCAP program. So we have someone from the Soil and Water Conservation District come out to our land use and environment committees. So they are involved. We do participate sometimes with the Soil and Water Conservation District's programs when there's a nexus. And more so, I think, with John Marshall, we're more involved with their programming, and we have an upcoming NIFWIF grant where we're going to be working with them and Friends of the Rappahannock. So they provide input on our regional programs and technical assistance all the time.
Do your directors interact? Are your directors aware of this relationship?
Oh, they're definitely aware, yes, and supportive. Greg is more hands-off as a manager, especially of late. Greg Witchelm.
Staff, it's a little easier.
He has a huge staff, so the staff, but yes, Tom is more, I would say Michael Trop is usually the one that comes out to things from John Marshall, Soil and Water, but I do have interactions occasionally with Tom directly.
The directors of Culpeper Soil and Water tend to have a strong relationship with the local elected officials.
Yes.
It's not uniformly the case, but it's often the case. And so that tends to be a good way of planning ideas and working, solutions through the process. If it's a nonprofit like us, or if it's an individual local government going to the soil and water district, it doesn't work so well. But if the board members know each other, trust each other, you can have those conversations more productively.
Yep.
I'll say for the Northern Neck, we're lucky in that our geographies overlap. When we went through the WIP development process for the phase 3, our Soil and Water District staff attended every meeting, and we actually held individual meetings with each locality. They were just three and a half hour marathon sessions, and the Soil and Water District were faithfully there at every meeting and provided a lot of great input. And then we recently partnered with them on doing some ag assessments that were much needed. We got a grant through DEQ to do some ag assessments. So we maintain a relationship. We attend their meetings when we can, their monthly meetings. Their chairman attends our PDC meetings, and they're always open to being invited to meetings where we need them or need their input or need them to present. The relationships with the localities is a little bit different. I think that it's much more fluid, and there's a lot of ebb and flow there because there's change. We have elected officials, so That's probably a little bit more of a challenge for the Soil and Water District with the communication with the local governments. But at a regional level, we work pretty well together.
That's great to hear how you guys are operating. Tri-County Cities in strategic planning right now, and we haven't. I'm hoping that we can really strengthen, what we can offer to GWRC right now. And Denise, I apologize for slightly hijacking the conversation, but I see a lot of potential there.
Oh, that's great news. Thank you.
Any other input for
sure.
Eldon, I wanted to ask Denise, or I guess maybe address the entire group with a question that occurred to me after sitting through what, if I had been running the meeting, I would have described it as a painful conversation. For the lack of conversation for the most part.
Right. Just remember, Kevin, you have the chairman of the commission, who's also chairman of Lancaster Board of Supervisors, on before you disparage any elected officials.
Oh, I'm not disparaging any elected.
That was a joke.
And I don't mean to disparage any local staff or anybody else by this. Just an observation that occurred to me after the fact, and I'm wondering, as organizations like RRBC and GWRC and others try and continue to function in this virtual environment with a recording being taken of the whole thing, whether that environment in itself dampens local participation. Does it impair local staff people's freedom or comfort level to think outside the box when they're not administratively or politically authorized to do so in advance?
I want to jump in first and say we have a great group that comes to our environmental managers meetings. Excuse me. And we always have a great time in person. And when we did the first 2 or 3 meetings online, they were fun. They were awesome. I was so impressed. People had to drive, because some rural areas, they had to drive to internet hotspots and they were in their car. And, David Nunnally could never make sure that he had his mute turned off. But we were still able to act like we were in the room together and have a really good discussion. And I walked away from it telling my husband the first couple of meetings, every time I'd be like, hey, nobody stepped on anybody else's conversation. There was no awkward silence. It worked really well. But the meeting yesterday, probably my fault as a facilitator, the way I set it up and ran it, and the number of people on the call and the types of questions I was asking, it was a little painful. But also, Kevin, I want you to know that I've been going more John's approach, and I've been having a lot of one-on-one phone calls and a lot of email strings one-on-one directly to make sure I can get deep into and really understand the issue at each locality, or for each department at each locality. So there has been a lot of things that aren't visible to everybody, but they are being documented and showing up in the plan.
Kevin, great question. I want to elaborate on my comments earlier. It's because it's kind of an ebb and a flow, and you really have to identify meaningful conversation. Like you're going to get reluctant participation if you're just there to meet and there to talk and air grievances. And we got to be careful that our meetings, when we bring the localities together to talk about these issues, don't become that. And we're lucky right now because we're undergoing the RAFT, the Resilience Adaptation Feasibility Tool, and we have had some very meaningful discussions at the locality level about moving forward with resiliency, community resiliency. And those conversations were substantive because we had the right staff people at the local level on the call and support agencies, VDH, social services, and nonprofits. And so those conversations were substantive because we had the right people on the call, and the conversation was guided in the right direction. And it's really being led by the locality. The local government staff and support staff are deciding, where can we achieve community resiliency up front? Where's the low-hanging fruit? And then we're attacking that specific thing. They're not being told what to do. They're developing it on their own. And there's a sense of ownership of it that really helps to make progress. If there's no sense of ownership, then it's kind of hard to just talk at people.
Okay, I guess that leaves it to me to weigh in. And I'm just simply going to say we're all trying to figure out what are the most effective techniques, and every day is different. And I think I think in so many areas of everything we do, not the least of which is engagement, we're going to be working on system re-engineering when we come out of the other side of this, and some patterns begin to develop again. In some ways, the engagement works better, and in some ways, it doesn't work at all. And I think some of it's individuals, how comfortable or uncomfortable they are with the dynamic state of everything. And that all sounds like gobbledygook, but every day's different. And a lot of what I'm saying right here is overlapped with trying to monitor a special session of the General Assembly, which is, I feel like we're angle parking in a parallel universe. So, all right, I don't know how much help that was. Other comments? Input for Denise? Great discussion.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay.
Let me just, while we have Michelle on the line, let me just, one of my contributions to Denise's meeting yesterday, just to give Michelle a heads up, is since they're some of their upcoming initiatives at GW are looking at greenway planning initiatives, if they can, find resources to go in that direction. And I'd encourage them to kind of think beyond their regional footprint to kind of link that up with the green infrastructure work done, on to the west and the east where it exists, so that maybe there's a bigger impact.
Thanks, Kevin. We definitely appreciate that. Because we last year did our regional transportation plan overhaul, and it had a big trails and blueways component. That was the major focus on this update, and we definitely tried to get people to think beyond the borders. So we appreciate y'all doing the same.
And in the development of the proposal, I referenced that document and the work that y'all did, Michelle, on that as a potential model for how the Greenways feasibility study could be done at GWRC.
Thanks.
I think somebody reached out to Matthew.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, with that, thank you very much, Denise. I hope this was some help to you, and it certainly was an interesting discussion, and I feel your challenge, and we'll just leave it at that. Our next meeting of this group is September 30, and you see the dates for the remaining meetings of the year. We're going to continue in the virtual format for now for the technical committee. I want to ask, before I talk just a moment about commission meetings for the rest of the year, if we've got some burning topics that someone would like to see us address at September or October and November meetings. Okay.
We can certainly have an update from probably Essex County Conservation Alliance on the lower Rappahannock Rivers, Scenic Rivers designation.
Okay. That sounds good. And of course, we're going to talking for a minute about our River Basin Commission meeting on September 23rd. You know, the agenda and the meeting notice went out just on Monday. And in that agenda, we will be getting an update on that that designation process. Brian and I will be talking a little bit more about that, and the Essex Conservation Alliance folks. We're also going to give our legislative members the opportunity, if they want to talk a little bit about the special session of the Assembly and anything coming out of that that is of import on water resources policy or budget issues. We know that the Water Quality Improvement Fund is impacted to some degree. We just don't know exactly what the bottom line of that will be until we get through the special session. There aren't any policy bills on the table yet that impact water resources, but there may be some language in the budget once that gets fleshed out. And don't ask me to predict when that is going to occur, because I don't know. We're going to have Greg Wilchells will be doing a presentation as requested by other members of the commission on stream exclusion, and he's going to capture kind of everything that they've done since the real focus on that program started back in 2013. And kind of bring us forward to 2020 and what they've accomplished and what he sees over the horizon from his perspective. Friends of Rappahannock will be, again, this was also requested at the last commission meeting by members, a report on the River Roundtable and the River Steward program that they operate. That is the agenda at this point. We're a month out. It usually gets certain revisions as we move forward over the weeks approaching the meeting. So stay tuned. We really don't have any significant reports on the major projects, the Healthy Watershed Forest and the River Gauge, simply because everything is pandemic disrupted. And you know, there's a little progress being made on Healthy Watershed Forest in Fauquier County, but again, pandemic is forcing other things to be higher priorities. And VDM obviously can't get anywhere near our project because they're totally consumed. Yes.
Two potential topics for the TAC in the October-November timeframe. There are a huge number of partners working on the Upper Rappahannock River Water Trail development, and there should be some projects in the ground by that time frame, and even some work over on the Upper Rapidan. So probably not me, but somebody from that partnership could be tapped to provide the TAC an update. And then I'm hoping to touch base with DEQ on several TMDLs that are being developed or IPs being developed in Culpeper County. And I'd love to have a discussion about the Rappahannock and tributaries TMDL, which was completed, the development study, and we want to push forward looking towards an IP for that. And I have a call with Dave Evans after this to discuss that.
Yeah. Alden, this is Dave. So I was also going to say, for an upcoming technical meeting, I'm hoping to have the virtually, it won't be in person, but a virtual initial public meeting for an implementation plan project in Culpeper County. And there are adjoining watersheds that have had bacteria TMDLs years ago. Mountain Run, which the town of Culpeper is in the middle of, and then adjoining it to the northeast is Muddy Run, was subject to a separate TMDL. And then a final chunk of the Hazel River watershed also adjoins Muddy Run. And so the implementation plan would address the old TMDLs in each of those watersheds. But also in Mountain Run, there are some more recent benthic or aquatic life impairments. And we want to take a creative approach and try and address the benthic impairments as well, because many of the BMPs that you put in place for bacteria also have the benefit of reducing sediments and or nutrients, which are at the heart of the aquatic life impacts. So anyway, I could just in 5 minutes, 5-10 minutes in an upcoming meeting, I'd like to talk about that.
Okay, we'll talk more. We've got those 3 meetings coming up, and we'll try to plan those out at times when there's the most valuable to your reporting. And I see John McCarthy, you weighed in. PEC may have some input on or something to tell us on river access.
Well, I just think that if Brian was suggesting who might be the person to do that, it might be Maggie at PEC. We're currently working with both the Riverside access in Fauquier County and then the Rogers Ford access in Culpeper, Fauquier, and we probably will have some progress to report then. So Maggie might be the good person to do that.
One, and that would be the water trail project.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Alvin, Pat Cody.
Yes, sir.
On Greg's presentation on livestock stream exclusion, as I understand, this is really a central issue to WHIP 3 for the state, and the legislature has been talking about the possibility of regulation down the road if something can't be done. So can the conversation and participation be broadened? I don't know if James Martin is still on.
No, James had to drop off.
But it seems to me there's a bigger conversation that maybe needs to be included on that.
Okay, maybe what we can do is use Greg's presentation and pose a couple questions for follow-up discussion at the December meeting. But I tell you what, Pat, let's us talk offline a little bit more about that.
Great.
Eldon, this is Michelle Edwards. I also wanted to offer that I should probably give an update sometime this fall on the Upper Rappahannock Watershed Plan.
Okay.
And that will be brief.
Would you like to do that at the September meeting?
Sure. I can just tell you, what we've done so far, the process, and what our plans are for going forward.
Okay. Very good. Wow, lots of input. Great. Thank you, folks. May have to figure out a way to hold a December technical committee meeting that nobody likes to come to. All right. I want to thank everybody very much. Mr. Chairman, you have anything you want to share with us before we adjourn?
I don't think I have anything extra to add. I just thank everybody for the presentations. They were great, informative.
Okay. Thank you for taking the time to join us, Jason. We really appreciate it. Okay, well, for those of us who are going to make the trip to Graves Mountain Lodge, we're doing it in person. We're doing it socially distanced. We've got a draft set of protocols for the meeting that will be going out to everybody a couple weeks in advance of it. My team and I here, including Paige, who is on this call, we managed to pull off a face-to-face meeting with one of our other groups just a few weeks ago, and that went successfully. It was sure as heck different, but it went successfully. So we're encouraged, and our chairman of the River Basin Commission has made it very clear to me he would really like an in-person meeting, and so that's what we're going to do. Lynn Graves of the Graves Mountain Lodge is providing us with adequate space so we can spread out. They have high-speed internet connections, so we can do the telephone link back like we used to do for meetings. Before we tried the video virtual, we will not be doing a video link. But if a commission member needs to call in, we'll be using our VoIP phone, so we'll have good connection. And unlike the last time we met at Graves, the phone connection was a speakerphone through a cell phone. We won't be doing that, thank goodness. If others on this group want to be able to call in just to listen, you'll be able to do that as well. With that, anything else for the good of the order, as they say? No. Thank you, everybody, very, very much. Great meeting today. Really appreciate everybody's input, and more to come.
See ya.
Thanks, Eldon.
Thanks, Eldon.